Joining us this week for the Wednesday Bookmark is Jonathan Hoover. Jonathan serves as the Senior Associate Pastor of New Spring Church in Wichita, Kansas. He also works as an assistant professor at Regent University's School of Psychology and Counseling, where he's the director of the Master of Science in Psychology program. We're going to talk this morning about his book, Stress Fracture, Your Ultimate Guide to Beating Burnout. Jonathan, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Oh, it's such a joy to be with you. Thank you.
In chapter 1, you reflect on the stress sweet spot, as it were, and there is a level at which stress is beneficial. What are the signs, Jonathan, that we've pushed our stress level beyond that sweet spot to the point where it becomes detrimental?
I think probably the most noticeable thing has to do with just your overall level of exhaustion. The truth is, when we're dealing with a good level of stress, we actually feel energized
Mm.
by pushing ourselves a little bit, and that's a good thing. It's when you start to feel really drained, like man, I got nothing left to give anybody. That's when I'm starting to know, man, I've really pushed myself too hard, and that happens both physically. I feel it exhausted physically. I feel exhausted mentally, and that exhaustion can even affect my relationship with God. So when I start to feel, being tired or fatigued, that happens to all of us. But when we start to feel just drained, then we know we're pushing ourselves too hard.
Let's talk about the physical side of stress. How does chronic stress and burnout affect the body?
Well, two things that are really important. One is that stress has an inflammatory. Let me back up. Too much stress has an inflammatory impact on the body, and so we get the outcome of inflammation. That can be muscle pain. It can be headaches. Right. So many migraines are stress related. It can mess with our digestion, and it can cause us to gain weight or lose weight in unexpected ways. So maybe I'm losing weight and I'm not even trying, or I'm gaining weight and it's not even like I feel like I'm eating any differently. It can affect just my overall energy level in the body. So I can just start to feel like I just don't have the energy to get up and do. Um, and the other thing is, we know that it can actually cause some conditions that we might otherwise look at as just, well, I went to the doctor and I found out I have this itis issue.
Hmm.
I say itis because all of the medical conditions ending in itis are inflammation related. But actually, that could be not necessarily related to stress, but it could be related to stress. And so our bodies pay a really heavy price when we push too hard. And unfortunately, I think as a nation, we don't recognize stress as having as big an impact on our bodies as it really does.
And you refer to diet, sleep, and exercise as the three non-negotiables. Talk a little bit about why those specific three things are so important.
Yeah, and I always feel like I bore people talking about these three things because it's sort of like, well, yes, that's a given. I mean, that's what I
Right. Yeah.
normally experience is people are like, of course,
Yeah.
diet, sleep, and exercise. But when I'm working with burned out individuals and they kind of do that, I'm like, well, how is your
Mm.
diet, sleep, and exercise? And they'll always be, well, it's not very good. Okay, well, that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, these three things are just really basic things that God expects us to take care of in ourselves. So I love the story of Elijah, where you see this person going through absolutely prototypical burnout. And what's interesting is, before God addresses the emotional aspect of burnout, God makes this guy eat and sleep and exercise before they even get to the question of how to deal with the sort of internal angst that burnout is causing. So being able to make sure that we're eating well, and there's so many different ways to improve our there's not just one way to improve our diet, but there's so many good ways. Just regular exercise. I'm talking about taking a walk around the block 5 days a week, 4 days a week.
Right.
And then just making sure that you're getting good restful sleep at night. And that can be getting good, making sure that your sleep hygiene is what it should be. Most Americans, our sleep hygiene is very poor. Or it could be talking to our physician about, how do I get better sleep. I promise you this: if you're listening to this and you're struggling with burnout, I promise you this: if you improve your diet, sleep, and exercise, it won't necessarily fix your problem with burnout, but your experience will improve dramatically, and you'll have a better platform to deal with the other parts of that issue.
So true. Let's talk about emotional exhaustion. You mentioned it a second ago. And some years ago, you talk about this in the book, you saw emotional exhaustion play out with your dad.
Mhm.
Talk about your father's story.
Yeah, so I grew up at the same church. My dad will have been pastor there for 40 years this year. And he has just been such an amazing leader. When he came there, the church was around 300, 350. Our weekly attendance right now is around 7,000. We've seen so much growth over the years. And
Wow.
my dad is that leader that everybody just looks to. What should we do? He's so stable. He's just always just right down the middle, right down the fairway, very brilliant leader. But he hit a point of burnout of a stress related breakdown. This was in 2010, so this was 15 years ago. And he suddenly was not that emotional, stable person. He was experiencing terrible anxiety, terrible sadness, alternating between pacing the floor and weeping. And this is like not
Mm.
the person that we knew. And it was really confusing to us because nobody could tell us what was happening to him, and we're trying to figure out what is this thing. That's actually what caused me to want to study this. Years down the road, one of the things that I've learned is that with high capacity leaders, and those aren't the only people who experience burnout. Burnout is a problem across the board, but high capacity leaders are especially prone to burnout. One of the things that I learned is what happened to my dad is the rule and not the exception with these high capacity individuals. They'll do great for a long time, but there'll come that moment where they'll hit the wall, and understanding what happened to me when I hit the wall and how to get better, that is so important because these individuals need to be back on the job. Fortunately for my dad, he was only away for 6 or 7 weeks and was able to get the care that he needed and come back and be better than ever. But it has to be addressed as it was with him.
That's very insightful. In your discussion on relationships, you smartly point out that emotional intelligence is powered by emotional energy, and being exhausted of emotional energy is what burnout is about. So, this in mind, how do we safeguard relationships when our emotional energy is running lower and we know it's running lower than normal?
I think first, and this is a Christian principle, you bring what is in the darkness into the light. So when I'm exhausted, I need to speak that to the people that I love. It's important for me to just be honest. I'm dealing with exhaustion, and so I know I'm not my normal self. And I
Mm,
know that may make things more difficult for us right now. I am working to get better, but I'm dealing with exhaustion. So speaking the truth is always a great first step. But I also think that in relationships and emotional intelligence, we can force a little bit of that intelligence to come back online. Keep in mind that one of the biggest challenges from a brain perspective is that when this is happening, the most relational part of my brain in terms of relational intelligence, this prefrontal cortex right behind my eyebrows, it's just not as activated, and the faster, more reactive parts of my brain are more engaged. But I can intentionally slow down my reactions, and in doing so give the better the more logical part of my brain an opportunity to actually interact with that situation. So
mm,
one of the things I think is very important if you find yourself exhausted and a little bit reactive is to continually remind yourself to be slow in your reactions. Okay, I need more time to process, not less, right? I need more time to think through the different possibilities here, not less. And I promise if you do that, you'll be in the right zone. You need to deal with the burnout so you can be yourself again. But in this season, own it and slow down. That'll help you a lot.
oh, I love that so much. Slow down. You close this book with a chapter called A Good Game Plan for Today. So let's land there. Leave our listeners with a game plan that they can begin to initiate even today.
If you're dealing with burnout, you need to make 3 appointments, and tomorrow wouldn't be too soon. You want to see your physician, your general care physician, tell them what symptoms you're experiencing, let them know what you're going through, and let them do a full physical. Then make an appointment with a counselor. If you don't have a counselor and you're going through burnout, that is a 2-inch putt. You need one. Get a therapist. Talk to them about what you're going through emotionally. Then make an appointment with a pastor or a spiritual leader that you trust. Sit down and talk to them about how God relates to all of this. Do that as quickly as you can. Also, make some allowances for the people in your life who are struggling because they see you struggling. Make an intentional decision to be patient. And then finally, one of the most important things is to hold on to hope. This is not a forever thing. You're not crazy, and this is not going to be a forever thing. God is going to walk you through this. You're going to be stronger than ever before. So remember that you're going to get through this, but get the help you need from the type of professionals that can help you. be patient with others that love you, and hold on to hope that this is going to be better.
Stress Fracture, your ultimate guide to beating burnout. Jonathan Hoover, our guest this week for the Wednesday Bookmark. Really wise and very practical stuff too, Jonathan. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you for the invite.